Another season is upon us. Freshmen arrive wide-eyed with dreams of future glory, while seniors prepare for their last chance at immortality. There are only a handful of these opportunities in a man's life, a handful of chances to distinguish yourself from the rest. It's on these fields where history is made, where legends begin and heroes triumph. Traditions tell the story of what you represent, of those that forge the legacy you uphold. When you come charging out of the tunnel, 100,000 people will be watching your every move. How you respond to that pressure is what defines you. These are the moments that reveal your toughness, your determination, and your pride. The Roughnecks on the Sooner Schooner. Ralphie charging out of the gate. And Chief Osceola planting his spear. The time has come. Your time is now.
You know, Jermaine Cole always says that it gets lonely at the mountaintop. And in our quest to reach the Rocky Mountains in order to cover our next conference that we're going to be covering here on the pre-spring preview series, where we take a look at all 138 FBS teams, we find ourselves in the Mountain West Conference, where things look dramatically different, where things look dramatically... There was a huge changing landscape, but at the exact same time, though, what I will say is that there is still a lot of intense football. There's still a lot of intriguing storylines to follow. So we're going to take a look at all of those storylines, take a look at every single Mountain West team here in tonight's deep dive into the Mountain West. And I hope you guys are excited for it tonight. If you guys are excited for it as well, I need you to do a couple of things for me real fast. Make sure you go ahead, hit that like button for me, and then also hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new, and also if you're watching on our other platforms such as Twitter, such as what we got going on over on Twitch. I would truly appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. Now, with that being said, it is going to be a little bit different here tonight. I did kind of allude to this. Some of my other hosts that normally would be here for this kind of preview, you know, they got lost while trying to get to the mountaintop of the Rocky Mountains, and so I will be standing alone here tonight. The other co-hosts have some life things happening going on, and it's going to be the same thing on Friday. So with that being said, it is a solo act, kind of going back to those original roots as well, back to when the channel first started. So it's going to be really interesting to see how things go. It's going to be a similar format still, but going to modify things a little bit differently, so please bear with me. But with that being said, before we kind of get into kind of power ranking these teams in the Mountain West, really fascinating to see just how much change that happened in this conference over the course of 2025, right? I mean, you're talking about what we witnessed from this Mountain West Conference last year, and it's a completely different cast of characters, right? Almost half of your conference that was part of this league last year, whether it's Boise State, who has been the front runner for the Mountain West for a very long time, along with some other notable powers like Fresno State and San Diego State. They left for the conference. Colorado State and Utah State also leaving as well. So a lot of state schools leaving to join the newly formed Pac-12, and we'll cover the Pac-12 later on in this pre-spring deep dive series. But we also get a new cast of characters, including, I think, what's going to be the most intriguing of these newbies, North Dakota State. It seems like every single offseason, what we always talk about is, when is North Dakota State, when are they going to make the jump from the FCS level up to the FBS? We finally see them go ahead and make that jump up to the FBS ranks. they are starting their first year of FBS action here in the Mountain West, but they're certainly not alone, right? Northern Illinois also joins this conference as well. They're coming from the MAC and they're looking to try and prove themselves as well with an extremely disappointing season out there in DeKalb, Illinois, now standing as the easternmost member of the Mountain West. And some would say it's a slightly higher level of competition than what they say in the MAC. A little bit more on that later on in this series. Couple more guys that are joining us here. You have also the UTEP Miners too. The UTEP Miners, they're coming in from Conference USA. Don't know how they're going to fit in terms of the competitive spirit of this conference in year number one, but I do love the geographical fit. I thought it's a much better fit for them than where they were in the Conference USA, because those of you that maybe are not as familiar with where El Paso, Texas is, El Paso is right on the border with Mexico, but it's also really close to the state of New Mexico as well. So much better travel partners for this UTEP Miners football team, not only with New Mexico, but with all of their conference friends outside of Northern Illinois, being in that mountain time zone with a couple, of course, like with San Jose State, for example, out in the Pacific time zone. Just a better geographical fit for UTEP. So that's going to be something that will be really fascinating to watch as we continue to take a look at this conference. Now, with that being said, what we will do, and it's going to be a little bit different here because of the fact that it is just going to be me here tonight, we're still going to power rank these teams. And so just to give a little bit of context in terms of how I power rank my teams, it was a similar methodology when I was doing the Sun Belt and when I was also doing the American power rankings with my fellow co-hosts, is that I'm going off of kind of a baseline perspective. I'm not assuming any development across the board. What I'm really taking a look at is, okay, no kidding, who are the key players that are going to be coming back onto your roster from a continuity standpoint? What are you looking at in terms of what are those ads in the transfer portal that you made that were more production oriented versus potential oriented? And then the same thing as well in terms of what did you lose in that transfer portal as well? What were those losses in the transfer portal? Were they also production oriented, who they actually produced for your football team? Or were they guys that you lost in the transfer portal that didn't really produce for you last season, but maybe it was a guy that maybe you did expect to go ahead and try and get yourself into that starting lineup and be a productive player a year or two for now. Those potential base losses as well. So with all that in mind, we'll go ahead and jump into what our graphics is going to be looking at for tonight's episode. So we are going to be doing our pre-spring Mountain West rankings, and it's just going to be my rankings for tonight because of the fact that, again, I don't want to come out here and try to tell the story of these other of the other co-hosts because it's not completely my story to tell. And we're trying something a little bit different here with this being the first time doing a live show and not necessarily having a co-host as well. So I do appreciate any feedback in the meantime. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it, starting with who we have as our number 10 team in this conference. Who do I have that's going to be at the very bottom? And I have it essentially split out into 3 different tiers. The top tier obviously is going to be who I think is going to be contenders in the Mountain West for this year in terms of who I think has a legitimate shot to win the Mountain West title. Got that middle tier that I think has the ability, more likely than not, to make a bowl game. And then the final tier that I have is going to be that tier where, no kidding, I think these teams are going to struggle throughout the regular season. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into who is that first team that we have. And it's going to be the San Jose Spartans that come in at number 10. They are going to be checking in last place for right now in terms of my pre-spring rankings. So it really is amazing how much has changed in the span of a year. I know that this time last year when we were going ahead and taking a look at the Spartans team last season, prior to the 2025 campaign, we really thought that this was a team that's going to be a Mountain West dark horse. If a couple of things bounce their way, they are going to go out there and they're going to compete for a possible college football playoff spots. Well, the exact opposite kind of happened for the Spartans team last season. This Spartans team ends up finishing 3-9. They nearly lose to a quality FCS team, mind you, but they still lost to an almost lost to an FCS program in Idaho in the process. 3-9. It was really rough to see, especially given that they got blown out towards the end of the year. Actually all three of their last 3 games, they end up getting blown out, losing by 45 to Nevada, losing by 22 to San Diego State, and then losing by 28 to Fresno State as well. So this was a team that was running a 4-game losing streak entering this offseason. So Ken Namatalo, he's going to have to come out here and really prove himself that what happened in 2025 was a blip on the radar and is not a trend, right? Because we saw what happened in year number 1. It was a solid year. They had a good cast of players coming back after a promising 7-6 campaign, and then they end up taking a step backwards instead of that anticipated step forward. And the problem is that I think this offense, for as solid as this offense was last season, I don't think that this offense is going to be on the same level as last year, right? First and foremost, you end up losing your starting quarterback in Walker Egat, who is a multi-year starter for the Spartans. He's now transferred over to Duke, and thank heavens that Duke managed to get that grab, because they would have been screwed given what happened in the Mensa situation, but that's not here or there. But not only did you lose Walker Egat in the situation, right? You also lose your top 3 receivers as well. The most notable being Danny Scordero, who transferred to Colorado. He had over 1,300 yards last season. Then you also lose Kylie Scholes, who had multiple touchdowns last year. He transfers out to Utah. And Leland Smith as well, who had almost 700 yards in his own right as the 3rd receiver. He transfers to UCLA. So for everything that went wrong last year, this was a solid passing game, and I'm really concerned that this passing game is not going to be on the same level as it was last year. And that's really critical, because when this team was not scoring at least 30 points, they lost every single time verbatim. In games in which they scored less than 30 points, they were 0-9 last season. When they at least hit that 30-game threshold, they were a 3-0 football team last year. And there was a couple of quality wins in here. They beat New Mexico, who New Mexico was in that hunt to the very end for the Mountain West title. There was also Hawaii on top of that. Hawaii is a very good football team in their own right. Had a really nice win the end of the year as well. Hawaii getting some love here in the offseason as well, to point that out. More on them in a second. But then on the defensive side of the ball, which was their weakness, I have concerns that their defense might take a little bit of a step back as well. Jalen Thomas is also no longer going to be here. He transferred to Washington State. He had 6 pass breakups last year, 59 tackles. But then most notably, they lose via Talafua, an edge rusher who was an all-conference edge rusher for the Spartans last season. He transfers to Colorado as well. So a lot of losses that they need to account for in the spring transfer portal window. But it's not all bad, right? Because they did add Jalen McLaughlin, who transfers in from Sacramento State. He had 9.5 tackles for loss and 7 sacks last season. So I don't think that it's all bad, but considering how rough it was for the Spartans in 2025 and the fact that I feel like they actually might take a step back, I have the Spartans checking in here at number 10. Let's go ahead and move on, though, to who is my number 9 team. And we talked about some of the newcomers earlier, but the first newcomer that we are going to see on this list is going to be the UTEP Miners. This is a big year for Scotty Walden. We thought that we are going to see this UTEP team take off last year, and that didn't happen at all. Malachi Nelson turned out to be a flop. Skylar Locklear wasn't much better as well, but both of those guys entered the transfer portal last year. So there was some reshuffling at the quarterback position, but it's not necessarily quarterback that I was the most concerned about. It's who is this quarterback going to throw the ball to? Ashton Emery, who started for this UTEP team, was their leading rusher last year. He's no longer with the team. He transferred to Cal, over 600 total yards and 6 touchdowns last year. He's gone. But then there are two top weapons in Dame Davis Jr. He transfers to Wake Forest, and then they also lose Kenny Odom as well. He ends up transferring to USF to learn under Brian Hartline. Gotta get a nice little drink in me now. There is some interesting ads here, which makes me a little bit more hopeful about this UTEP team in San Jose State. For example, they added EJ Colson out of the transfer portal. Transfers in from Incarnate Wood, had over 2,400 yards of total offense last year. Colson could give him some life. And then a couple of other pieces that they add as well. Carver Cheeks is a name to watch on this UTEP roster as well. He transfers in from Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado historically has been seen as one of the lesser FCS programs, particularly in the Big Sky. But Carver Cheeks, he was really proving that some of these FCS corners were butt cheeks. He had almost 100,000 yards receiving, which I don't care what level you're doing that. That's pretty impressive for a college receiver to be able to do that. So Carver Cheeks is certainly a name to watch out for UTEP. And then you also brought in somebody where you bring in Isaiah Bogerty. He transfers in from Texas Southern. He was one of the leaders of that Texas Southern defense last year. Could really mix things up and maybe make UTEP a competent defensive unit as well. And then, of course, you make a little bit of a dart throw add into Voris Jones, the running back. Transfer from Missouri, was sitting behind Ahmad Hardy. Ahmad Hardy is a stud muffin, so you weren't going to play ahead of him. That's just the name of the game. 4 and 4-star recruit, though, so you never know what you're going to get when you get a blue chip recruit onto your roster. Could have a breakout moment. You never know. So this is a big year for Scotty Walden. He has to show progress, and really how to define that progress, you have to look at UTEP as a team that has to be at least at the brink of making a bowl game, because if we're not, then it becomes a difficult conversation in terms of, is Scotty Walden the right guy for the job, or do they need to go in a different direction? And they're in a overall harder conference too, compared to the perception of Conference USA. So something to watch out for. Can Scotty Walden show some actual meaningful progress? Now, let's go ahead and jump into who's going to be our top 8. We're going to get into number 8 here now. At number 8, I do have the Nevada Wolfpack checking in at number 8 in the Mountain West as we begin to start up pre-spring football. So here's the thing with Nevada. For most of the year, it was a rough campaign for the Nevada Wolfpack. There's certainly no secret about that, but Nevada did show some signs of life towards the end of the year. They did end up winning against San Jose State. They got that huge blowout victory at home. They do also find a way to beat Wyoming on the road as well towards the end of the year as well, before they lose the battle for the Fremont Cannon to UNLV. But Nevada, for as rough a year as they had, they do end up winning 2 of their last 3. So I do think that this team is trending a little bit more towards the right direction under Jeff Chody. It's just a matter of, can Jeff Chody kind of come out here and can they harness that momentum? First couple of years here, they go 3-10 because they did have the Hawaii game, so they had a 13th game. They went 3-10 last year, and then this year they're going 3-9. But again, you did win 2 of your last 3 games. You do have what could very well be one of the best edge rushers in this conference, and it's Dylan Labara. He's an edge rusher for this Nevada team. He's going to be the biggest key player on this defense, someone that is going to be able to harass the quarterback at all times. He was a first-team all-conference guy last year, and he is back with this Nevada team, which is good because he does lose his fellow edge rusher on the opposite side of him in Jonathan Maladondo. He transfers to Ole Miss. He had 5 sacks last year, was second on this team in sacks, only to Dylan Labara. So going to be a lot more responsibility on Dylan, it seems like, this year. But there is a couple of pieces that they did end up adding that could work out and could play. They add Solomon Bridges, who transfers from Arkansas, as well as Larry Turner Gooden, who transfers from San Jose State. Unironically, both those guys were 4-star recruits. So there is at least reason to believe here that this defense is going to be better than last year. And we did see, at least at times, this offense did show a little bit of sign of life with the 55-point outpouring from San Jose State. But really beyond that, Nevada, they really didn't get it going much offensively. I think the defense is going to be fine here. I think they'll be overall a solid defensive unit. But because I don't really see anything of note here offensively, you're really banking on those guys that are already in the building prior to the start of this offseason and proving. And because we're looking at it from a baseline perspective, that is a little bit of a gamble this early in the spring ball. So, until I hear some more positive news out of spring camp, I can't do Nevada much higher than number 8 on my list right now. But at number 7, on the other hand, I can be a little bit higher on this next team that we have on our list, and that is the Wyoming Cowboys. So, similar story to Nevada, right? The difference between Nevada and Wyoming is, so last year, Wyoming was a good to, at certain times, really good defensive unit last season, but it's still kind of a similar offensive output from their offense. Whereas Nevada was just, they were solid. It was a liquid or a gas situation, but at the same time, it is not a, it was not a great defense. So that's why I had Wyoming ahead of Nevada. I think the baseline is still a little bit ahead of Nevada, at least at this time. I think there's some intriguing players to definitely keep an eye out for. Tyler Hughes, for example, he's a transfer from William and Mary. He had over 3,000 yards and 31 total touchdowns last year as a starting quarterback for William and Mary. They also added a couple of other guys in Markel Holman, who transfers from Western Illinois. He had 1,400 yards of total yardage between rushing and receiving. Thaddeus Ganaris as well, transfers from Dartmouth. He had 5 sacks. Anthony Bevers Jr. also transfers from USC as a former blue chip recruit as well. Jay Solville, in kind of a similar spot, is kind of a Scott Walden that we talked about earlier in this pre-spring preview. And that is, they have to absolutely show progress. Since Jay Solville took over, we're talking about a 3-win season in 2024. Now a 4-win season in 2025, where prior to that, Wyoming, pretty good program. They took down Texas Tech, for example, in the 2023 campaign, beat them at home. Year before that, this was a team that also made a bowl game. Same story could be told for 2021, where they also made a bowl game. This was a consistent bowl participant prior to Jay Solville taking over, and he was a part of that staff during those years. But whatever has happened ever since he took over, it just hasn't fully clicked. Now, with that said, I do think that the defense could have a chance to uptick slightly. They could be even better than what we experienced last year. However, with Wyoming, the million-dollar question is, can they actually put some points up on the scoreboard? They only put up 30-plus points a couple of times, both games in which they won, but one of those games was an FCS opponent. But they know how to play good defense. And so even though they are coming in at number 7 in my pre-spring deep dive, this is still going to be a stingy team that simply can't be overlooked. And if they're overlooked, they can get a couple of these teams that are going to end up starting in my upper half of the Mountain West rankings. So this is something to definitely keep an eye on. Wyoming could be a little bit of a wild card here as we approach into July and into August. So something to certainly keep in mind. Now, let's go ahead and start rounding off this at least bottom half here and really getting into this last tier in terms of teams that I do honestly expect to struggle a little bit. It's a team that I haven't mentioned yet. Northern Illinois actually comes in as my number 6 team in the conference. We thought that Thomas Hammock was going to lead the way for this Northern Illinois program. And he ends up leaving all of a sudden, and he ends up getting an opportunity to go ahead and coach in the NFL and be an assistant for the Seahawks. And we're extremely happy for him. But it is a little bit of a tough break from a continuity standpoint, trying to get a new coaching staff in this close to spring ball. So it's a little bit of a tough break for Northern Illinois. And we saw this song and dance before with Bowling Green. Now, the person that did take over for this Northern Illinois Husky team that's going to lead the way for this program moving forward is going to be Rob Harley. And he was the defensive coordinator for this NIU team last year. And this was a team that went 3-9 last season. So nothing to really write home about, but the defense was actually pretty solid. I remember taking a look at NIU's defensive numbers back when we did end up seeing the Thomas Hammock leave for the Seattle Seahawks, and they were right about in the middle. Actually, they were they were top 65 from a points per game standpoint defensively. So it's actually a solid defensive unit out there in DeKalb, Illinois, and a chance to potentially be better as well because of what they brought in the transfer portal. Multiple guys from the FCS ranks that were very productive, which is something that I am very encouraged about when it comes to this Northern Illinois football team. Now, the reason why that they were 3-9, though, is a similar problem to what we saw from Wyoming, a similar problem to what we saw from Nevada last year, is that they were absolutely horrific in terms of going out there and actually putting points up on the board. There were games, I kid you not, there were games where the defense did their job. They allowed 20 points or less, and they lost in those games, which is insane to think about, where your defense can give up 20 points or less, especially with how the rules of college football definitely favor the offense over the defense. And half the time, your defense allows 20 points or less, and you're only coming out of that 3-3, which is really, really difficult to see. So with that said, I actually do think, like I mentioned, because of what they brought in compared to what they lost in the transfer portal, I do think that this defense actually has an opportunity to be better. However, I don't know if it's going to translate into the defensive statistics, because I don't know if we are going to see that offense take a step forward. Now, because I do believe that they have a little bit more returning talent, they returned Devion Reynolds, who was a third-team all-conference guy in the MAC last year. I'm willing to give him a little bit more benefit of the doubt. Rob Harley knows how to coach a defense. It's just moving forward, what's the offense going to be looking like? Can they at least not be in the 120s? If they're a top 100 offensive unit, NIU also another one of those teams that does have a legitimate chance by the time the season is over to be in the top half, but they have to at least be decent offensively, or below average would at least make them more competitive than they were last season. The fact that we're talking about them being below average and that would be an improvement, that's really what we're talking about in terms of NIU football at this time. So more to come. We'll see how Rob Harley handles the head coaching duties. He is the interim head coach, so this is a shot to be a head coach of a major program. Now, we now get into the next tier that I have. And in this second tier that I have, this is the quintessential. I don't think it's realistic that you're going to be competing for a conference championship. But I do think that it would be realistic, and it's an expectation for me. I expect this team to be playing in a bowl game at the very least. So a lot of the teams that we talked about, I think these teams are going to struggle in their own ways. This team, I think, is going to at least be a solid football team. And there's only one team in this tier. The one team that's in this tier, and they come in at number 5 for me, it's the Air Force Falcons. So The Air Force Falcons longtime head coach has one of the most experienced head coaches in college football in Tony Calhoun, who's now coming up on his 20th year of college football. So, Tony Calhoun's been a very loyal guy, and we know what they are, right? Because this is a team that, unlike all of the other teams that are included in this conference, they cannot partake in using the transfer portal to supplement their roster, because the purpose of the Air Force Academy, obviously, is to turn out officers that are going to be in charge of our military someday. So the Air Force serves a different purpose from a football perspective than most of the other colleges that you're going to run across, at least at the FBS level. It does, however, also provide a unique advantage in terms of being able to keep your team together, because the people that you are bringing in as a freshman, and another thing too is they can't participate in the redshirt rule. So they only have 4 years to develop versus potentially 5, and what we've seen from other schools, 6 to 7. Air Force, on the other hand, is unique in the fact that most of their guys are not going to enter in the transfer portal. So you have an opportunity to build a lot more continuity. And so far, in terms of the teams that we actually covered, they do come in with multiple all-conference guys, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. Blake Fletcher comes in as a second-team all-conference linebacker. He's going to be the leader of your defense. But you also have Roger Jones Jr. Coming in at the safety position as well. He was a third-team all-conference guy in the Mountain West last year. Now, because of what we talked about in terms of, you only get 4 years, you also only have an opportunity to get things right in terms of supplementing the roster through the high school ranks, and you're constantly having to look in the diamonds in the rough, because the high free stars or blue chip players are not going to exactly line up at your door. We know what they are, right, at this point in the year. But I do think the defense could be better here. And that's important, because this defense struggled tremendously, especially when you're talking about what happened most of September into October, where there was a stretch where they gave up 34 points or more 5 games in a row. But the defense did get better as the season went on, and that led to more success for the Air Force football team. And so, because of that extra continuity that you see, unlike many of the other places, as well as the fact that their defense did get better and the team as a whole got better as the year went on, that leads me to believe that Air Force is going to be an improved football team. A football team that was 4-8 last year. I think they step it up, and they win a couple more games at the very least compared to last year, and we see them back in a bowl game. I think that would be a reasonable expectation, but not that same expectation that I have for the next 4 teams that I have on this list. These next 4 teams, I think, are going to be your quintessential. These are the teams I expect to be in the hunt to win the Mountain West title at the end of the season. And I think there's a substantial gap here between number 4 and number 5 as well, where you see who we ranked in the first 5 teams, 6 through 10. They're going to be relatively grouped together. There's a little bit of a gap after that. Air Force comes in at number 5. They're kind of their own tier at this point. And then there's a much more significant gap between number 4 and number 5. So they're next to each other on the rankings here, but they're not that close to each other in terms of actually being able to compete with each other. I think these next 4 teams, I think, are all significantly better than the Air Force Falcons, at least at this time. So how are those 4 teams grouped together? Well, my number 4 team does come in as for the New Mexico Lobos. How about the season that Jason Eck did have for this New Mexico football team last year? He comes in and immediately provides that immediate success, 9-3 in the regular season. And really, if it wasn't for some tiebreakers that I didn't love how the tiebreakers were structured last year, we saw an odd situation in terms of the conference use power rating models, their own computer models to determine who the conference champion is, and that's how they spat out Boise State and UNLV. I had a little bit of an issue with that, to be honest with you, because of the fact that the thing with power ranking models is that it does still take into account preseason expectations, even when you get into November to a degree. So New Mexico did not have very high expectations, at least not as high as UNLV and Boise State last season. So New Mexico got a little screwed from that perspective. Still a phenomenal season, and a team that's bringing back a few all-conference guys. Jackson Eck, not sure if he's related to the head coach or not. Someone can let me know either in the comments or in the live chat. But Jackson Eck, first team all-conference guy. He's going to be a leader of their defense, but he's not alone on that defensive side of the ball. They still have Brian Booker, who is an interior defensive lineman. Absolutely is incredible in terms of being a run stopper as well. He's going to be your third team. And then Caden Robnett is one of your leaders on the offensive line as well. Second team all-conference guy. So multiple all-conference players that are coming back for you. They do end up losing their punter in Daryl Hughes. He ends up transferring to Florida State. That was another all-conference guy. Tough loss to take in, but it is what it is. So I'm a little worried about how the special teams is going to look for New Mexico, which doesn't sound like a huge deal. But when games get pretty close, special teams actually plays a pretty significant role. So that'll be something to watch out for. They do also lose Keyshawn James Newby, who's going to the NFL draft. So we're very excited to see where he goes as possibly a day 3 player, maybe even could sneak into the top 3 rounds, depending on how interviews and how NFL combine results are digested. Thing that I am concerned about is Dorian Thompson. He left this program. He was a star for this New Mexico team last year. And yet he leaves for Cal. So I am concerned about who's going to pick up that offensive productivity in that overall receiver room, just not talking about wide receivers, but also talking about the tight ends as well. So I'm a little concerned about that. But I am a huge Jason Eck truther. Even though I don't think that this, although I still have concerns about what their offensive playmakers are going to be like, who's going to be stepping up internally, as well as what special teams is going to look like for New Mexico going into 2026. I do really enjoy Jason Eck as a head coach. I mean, he fits perfectly for what New Mexico should be all about. And so them at number 4, even though I do have a little bit more questions than the other contenders that I have on this list, I would not be surprised at all if New Mexico is playing for the Mountain West title game when the season is over. That being said, though, the team that I had a little bit less of concerns about going into the Mountain West season is this number 3 team that's on this list, the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. Listen, we already know what Hawaii is all about. They got some weapons for sure. I mean, Micah Alahado has to be one of the more entertaining pieces in not just the Mountain West, not just in the G5, but we're talking about in all college football. He is an electric player to watch, maybe a tad underrated somehow because of the fact that, not a lot of East Coast folks or big brand oriented folks know what's happening because the Hawaii test, most people aren't trying to stay up for the Hawaii test. And that's a shame because he is an electric player to watch, but he's not alone. Even though he did lose Jackson Harris to LSU in the transfer portal, he also brings back his all-conference receiver, Pafele Ashwak, a second-team all-conference guy. And those two are among 4 all-conference players that Hawaii is going to bring in. And you know what's even scarier? I think this defense is going to be better than last year too. They bring in Ozzie Pollard, who you're going to scoff a little bit when you hear this, but he is from Marion, an NAIA school. But for someone that plays in the interior of the defensive line, being able to get 8 TFLs and 5 sacks as an interior defensive lineman, that's certainly not nothing. And that's something that I'm very intrigued about to see if Ozzie Pollard could get on the field, because I think he can do some things schematically for that Hawaii football team, such as stopping the run. And then as a little bit of a dark throw, they had Kobe DeCambra, transferring in from UNLV, former 4-star recruit. Could be a little bit of dart throw, could be a depth piece. You never know what you get from someone that was a highly touted recruit out of high school, but for one reason or another, it just hasn't really panned out yet. Timmy Chang has really started to turn this thing around. His record has not been that impressive, 22 and 29 over his first 4 years. But what we have seen, however, is we've seen a Hawaii football team, that has steadily improved under Timmy Chang. Only 3 wins in 2022, in spite of the fact that they played 13 games. Then next year number 2 under Chang. They won 5 and 8, but they give teams like Vanderbilt, they gave them a scare during the course of that season. And then there was a couple of other games that they played where a couple of bounces the other way. We could have been talking about a 7-win Hawaiian team in 2023. Then the year before that, 5 and 7. But then again, they almost beat UCLA. They almost beat San Diego State. They almost beat UNLV, actually. So again, a team that goes from, losing by quite a bit to just losing by very little now. And now 2025, we start to see a team as a program really start to figure things out. They figure out how to win those close games. They were much better at finishing those close games last year. Just looking on my screen right now, they end up finishing, I believe, 3-2 in close games. That includes the Hawaii Bowl victory over an exciting Cal team to watch. So now this leads us into 2026 off the heels of a 9-4 season. Biggest question is, how are they going to replace the production of Jackson Harris? And then can Micah Alhado remain healthy? Because if he can remain healthy, because he did get dinged up last season, if he can remain healthy, he is going to be a player to watch. And he's going to be a team to watch in this conference. So very good football team for sure. Very excited to watch Hawaii play. Let's move on, though, to a team that I do expect to play in the conference championship. And you could probably guess I expect Hawaii to be there unless there are some changes to the NCAA waivers. I'll get to that part in a split second. But let's go ahead and jump into what that number 2 team. I have UNLV at number 2. So this UNLV football team, I do like. What I like about them is that Dan Mullen has proven right away that he hasn't lost his touch. It's always a little bit of a nerve-wracking experience when you're bringing in a coach that was fired from his last job and then was working in TV for a couple of years. He goes back to coaching, and then so you never know what you're going to get. Dan Mullen is doing a good job in UNLV and picking things up from where Barry Odom left off, winning 10 games last year and making it once again to the Mountain West title. And now UNLV is in a unique position now that Boise State is no longer in this conference. That was the biggest hurdle that UNLV couldn't figure out over the last couple of years, because forget last year, they were also in the title game in this conference a couple of years ago, taking on Boise State. They lose that game as well at Boise State. But so now that hurdle is gone. They do also bring back a couple of pretty nice weapons. They add Jaden Thomas. They brought him back. He was one of the best running backs in the Mountain West last year. They also brought back Austin Boyd, who's going to be a nice blindside protector as a third-team all-conference offensive lineman as well. So that's really good to see. Does Jackson Arnold figure out how to take care of the football? He's transferring in from Auburn, formerly of Oklahoma. And there was a little bit of a moment where we thought that Jackson Arnold, he was going to be the future of Oklahoma. And then in 2024, things didn't work out at Oklahoma because he was a little bit too turnover prone. He then goes to Auburn, and it's really the same song and dance there, to the point where Jackson Arnold was no longer the full-time starter by the time the season did come to an end. Now he's here at UNLV, and can Dan Mullen figure out, with the amount of talent that he does have, can he cut down on the turnovers? If he can cut down the turnovers, but still show more of those flashes of what made him such a highly talented player coming out of high school, this offense is going to be pretty unstoppable, considering they have a dynamic running back in the backfield as well. And they're going to need Giant Thomas to step up as well as Jackson Arnold to make sure he's not necessarily turnover prone, because they lost Anthony Colandrea, and that is a tremendous loss to have. Transferring to Nebraska, over 4,000 yards passing, 33 touchdowns. They do also lose a couple of solid defensive pieces as well, as Tamis Adelaide and Andrew Proudrell. Both of those guys transferring to power conference schools. But in return, they only add Avery Helm out of TCU, former blue chip recruit. So, and that's worrisome, because the defense at times, it was a little bit of a red flag for this football team last season, especially somewhat early on, where they let Idaho State put 31 up. They beat Miami, but they give up 38 in that game. They give up 48 to Boise State, 56 to Boise, 48 to Air Force, 40 to New Mexico. But down the stretch, the defense did play better. After that New Mexico game that they lost 40 to 35 at the start of November, the most that they gave up was, again, Boise State in the conference championship game. But it was an improved unit, but losing a couple of those solid defensive pieces. The defense is a little bit of a question mark, but do love that Giant Thomas is back. I think the offensive line is going to be solid for UNLV. And Jackson Arnold, he's a talented quarterback, but just has to put it all together. So I have faith in Dan Mullen. I think Dan Mullen can do some good things. And so that's why I have him at number 2. And I'm sure many folks are going to be surprised about who I have as my number 1 team in this conference. It's going to shock some folks, but hear me out here. I got North Dakota State as my number 1 team going into spring ball in the Mountain West Conference. So I understand the song and dance about North Dakota State. They were an FCS program last season. And because they were an FCS program last season, the story about FCS programs in general is that they simply do not have the same talent level as your FBS programs. But again, North Dakota State, they're not your regular FCS program. This has been a North Dakota State football team where 10 of the last 15 seasons, they've won the national title at the FCS ranks. In fact, even though last year would be labeled a disappointment for the Bison, losing in the second round of the FCS playoffs to Illinois State, who did end up playing and nearly winning the national championship, they still went undefeated that season. And not only did they go undefeated that season, but they end up winning outright the toughest conference in the FCS, which is the Missouri Valley Conference. For those that are not as familiar with FCS football, think of Missouri Valley as either the Big Ten or the SEC in FCS football, depending on what your personal preference is. Just top tier conference at the FCS ranks. So this team goes 12-0, and they make it to the FCS playoffs. Disappointing exit, but still was one of the best FCS teams last season. Did you know they bring back 6 guys from this North Dakota State team that went undefeated in a regular season that were all conference last year? 3 of those 6 guys were playing in the trenches and were all first and second team all conference guys. They also bring back Darius Grievous and Jackson Williams for your skill positions. And then you want a nice little bump from the special teams. Aaron Bickerton is also back as well. Now, they did lose some pieces as well on that offensive line and in special teams, but you still get an all-conference special teamer back. You got multiple all-conference guys in the trenches on both sides of the ball. It really comes down to what can you expect from quarterback play for Cole Payton, who's going to the NFL draft, as well as who's going to step up in the receiving room for Bryce Lane, who is also going to the NFL draft as well. But they have a very good coaching staff under Tim Palesk. 3rd year with this program, 26-3 overall record. That does also include a trip to the FCS National Championship game. So they're going to be really good in the trenches. They're going to run the ball down your throat. They have a really good home field advantage as well. And I will say this about North Dakota State. I think the biggest threat for them to not win the Mountain West this year, it's not necessarily the teams that you see on this list. Although I think UNLV, Hawaii, and New Mexico, all of those teams can pose significant challenges to North Dakota State in their own unique ways. I've talked about it earlier tonight. Really, the biggest thing is the NCAA. So, for those of you that are not familiar with the NCAA, what we have here is if you're an FCS program and you make your way up, mind you, this is a Division One program moving up to another level of Division One. This is not going from D3 to D2. You have to serve a probationary period. It is a 2-year probationary period. During those 2 years, you're not eligible for any postseason action unless you can get a waiver from the NCAA. Me personally, I think that is the dumbest rule on the face of the earth. Here is why. So I understand if a team is moving down because they typically have FBS level players, for example, and if you're moving down with those FBS level players, you're going to have an unfair advantage over the teams that are already down at the FCS level, or in this case of a St. Francis, PA, for example, Division One level players that choose to stay, they're going up against Division 3 competition. So I understand if you're moving down, having those restrictions for a team that is moving downward. But if I move up and immediately I prove that, hey, no kidding, I prove that I can compete with the bigger boys, I should be allowed to compete for a postseason title of some sort, whether that's a bowl game, whether that's a conference championship, or that's a college football playoff spot as well. So that's really the biggest threat for me is North Dakota State not being allowed. And I know the conference is stepping in and trying to get a waiver, but the NCAA in the past has been pretty firm about this. They have not allowed teams to finish their probationary period earlier. There's been circumstances where if you're in year 2 of this and there need more bowl teams, then an exception can be made, but it hasn't been made for conference championships. It certainly absolutely has not been made for the college football playoff. But I absolutely love this football team. I think it's the most well-run organization in this conference with what they've accomplished over the years. Tim Plex is an incredible coach. They have incredible pieces in the trenches, so it doesn't really matter who plays at the quarterback position. They're going to run the ball down your throat. And the Fargo Dome has an incredible home field advantage as well. So that is going to wrap things up here tonight for my Mountain West preview going into spring ball. Definitely let me know down in the comments who you think is going to be. Do I have a certain team too high? Do I have a certain team too low? Definitely let me know down in the comment section, or you can even let me know in the live chat as well. Definitely want to hear your thoughts on all of this. Monday, we will continue the deep dive series. Hopefully, I sound a little bit better because I didn't realize how stuffed up my nose is until we started doing a live show. So I didn't sound like this all day. And then, of course, we get in front of a camera and we're folding like a lawn chair from a physical standpoint. So that's tough, but it is what it is. Monday, we are going to have another G6 conference. Hopefully, we do see a schedule reveal. So then what we could do for one of these G6 conferences that we haven't talked about yet here in the springtime period, we can not only talk about power ranking these teams 1 through X, but also talk about biggest schedule, big winners and losers, because most of the G6 hasn't released their schedule yet. So hopefully that changes soon. In the meantime, appreciate all you guys coming out and watching the live stream tonight. And, hopefully I did good for you guys, even though I am on my own and I am also, a little stuffed up. But, the show must go on. We move for no man. But, hey, with that being said, visit Jake of College Football Red Zone. Sign it off. But hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care.